This is Rising Phoenix Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Rhodes. This podcast is for men struggling with an unwanted divorce. I interview experts on divorce, mental health, and I provide insights gained from my own divorce journey. You are not alone. Join me. Joining me today is Edy Nathan. Edy, let's just jump right into this. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. What I'd like to share with the audience is that we all have stories, and I'm a storyteller before I'm anything else, and our stories impact us, no matter if they hurt us or they give us joy. And what I do is I help people with the stories that hold them back. And I might talk about this as like the innermost cave where we get stuck and we have shadows that just gnaw at us in ways that we may not even have words to describe. And so I'm a public speaker, and I always like to find new words for old themes. And so, for example, to survive a divorce, I might call you a survivalist as opposed to a survivor, because any time we're working with grief, anytime we're working with loss, anytime we kind of have lost the self or the soul or kind of the sense of self, it's quite the trip that we take. And there's a lot of different ways that we take it. Survivalist as opposed to survivor is kind of like being in that forest and trying to figure out, what am I going to do? How am I going to get out of this place that I'm in and still have some part of myself intact? So I work like this as a clinician. I work like this as I'm going around the world talking about grief and loss and trauma. And usually, what I say is I talk about the three things that people do not ever want to talk about, which is trauma, grief, and sex.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a trifecta.
It is. It's a perfect trifecta.
Yeah. It's just like I said before we started. I was trying to figure out how to attack this, and I'm gonna take a left turn here based on what you just said.
I love
And
it. I love left turns.
or right, could be right too. I don't know. You talked about story, and I agree. I think Brene Brown talks about this. Dr. Anthony McDonald, who I've had on, talks about narrative therapy. Story, I think, is everything. Like how we live our lives is based on stories. And one of the things that I'm seeing currently, and I see it a lot. I run a support group on Facebook, and there's a lot of men in there, and I see a lot of men whose it's very clear that the story of them is that their worth is very low. Like they have very little, if any, self-worth. And when they go through a divorce, that dips maybe even lower, or it certainly is solidified in their minds. And so,
Yep.
what do you say to that man who feels like, there's a guy who literally posted this morning, I can't be alone. I am nothing without her. What do you say to that gentleman? How does he navigate this shit show called divorce?
Yeah, it is a shit show, isn't it?
It is.
And I have a big a big soft spot in my heart and in my soul for men, and especially the men of today, um, because there are few skills that they're given to cope with loss and grief. And one of the things that you found me because of an article that I wrote on Psychology Today, right?
Yep.
And this article was really about, isn't it time to kind of learn about yourself as opposed to
Hmm.
getting information about who you are from another?
Yeah.
And so what I tell this guy is, it doesn't feel like it's an opportunity, but this is actually an opportunity. And the reason it's an opportunity is because you are low, you're down, and you haven't really, perhaps, at the age you are now, learned about who you are, what you like, what you don't like, what turns you on, what turns you off. And yeah, sexually, but not only sexually. How have you been traumatized in your life? How does that make an imprint on you? And I talk about the traumatic imprint during divorce and during other things that happen in our lives, and it's like a slap. It's like that traumatic imprint is like that slap, and though the slap is done, the slap mark remains. And
Mhm.
how do you learn about yourself through that slap mark? Like, now is an opportune time to think, okay, I don't know who I am, I don't know how to be alone, and that's true. Maybe you don't. And yet somehow you are being alone, and you're alive enough to be able to say, I don't know how to be alone. And that is forthright, that's courageous, and it's tenacious, because men especially, and I don't mean to create a bubble for men, but I think that men who are going through this very hard, harsh reality of a divorce, and then trying to figure out who they are, especially if it was kind of a surprise, although I never really believe it's that much of a surprise. It's just that we don't want to see what's right before us, right? And so now it's like the challenge is on, the game is on. And how are we going to say, okay, I need to kind of, I'm stripped down, and how do I birth myself? And that's not meant as a feminine birth. It's actually meant as, you're now in your cave. And now it's time to get in touch with all of the shadows that you've maybe never looked at before, the parts of you that have been low, or the parts of you that have not yet been developed, or the parts of you that want to love, but maybe don't even know what love is.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. It's definitely an opportunity. It doesn't feel like it for sure, but it is. It made me think about, you mentioned sort of about how it's a challenge, right? And I feel like I think I was going to ask the question is how do we change this in men in that physical challenge is something that men we kind of rise to, right? We're comfortable with,
Yep,
I mean, not everybody, but I mean, a lot of men, if you say, I bet you can't, move that whatever or pick that thing up or like, I'm at least going to try, right?
of
But
course.
but when we're talking about a mental challenge, we shy away from that so much. How do we? I guess I think I understand the why, right? Because being a man, we're not really told to do anything with our emotions other than stuff them down. Shut up, man up,
Yeah,
don't cry.
swallow. Big
Yes,
boys don't cry. Big boys
all
don't cry.
all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
And
yeah,
that messaging starts at three,
yeah.
two.
Yeah. I mean, it's. I mean, I know I lived it, but how do we change that? How do we get men to tackle the challenge of mental challenges as equal as they tackle physical challenge?
It's a great question, and I'm just going to do a little segue here for a moment. I had a chance when I was going to school to work in New York in a hospital, Bellevue, on the 19th floor with the prisoners, and it's a locked ward. And these are tough guys, right? I mean, they are on that prison ward because not because they're good guys,
Right,
the emotions that they were willing to experience and talk about, because they'd really gotten to their lowest points, and the lives that they had lived and experienced up to the point of imprisonment were really quite sad stories, frankly. And if you heard any one of them, you'd say, my God, this guy never even had a chance. He didn't
right,
have a chance. In some ways, when the messaging is from both the mother and the father, or whoever the parents were, maybe they were same-sex partners, but
right,
parents, but the reality is that the messaging is, big boys don't cry,
right,
big boys don't have emotions. And what is interesting is, if with the caveman kind of mentality of, oh, I can move this,
right,
if we could have a different take of, if I can show one emotion and I can share it with one guy, that guy might actually respond to me with that emotional, um, with their own emotions or their own emotional perspective. And from there, it just continues to grow. So it becomes a story of not only self reflection, but self sharing. I'm really feeling bad about this man. And you put it in your language and you put it in the masculine because the fear of going to the feminine is huge for so many men. And yet we certainly have the chromosomes of both, right? And
Yeah.
so it's about finding the right language that is accurate. Survivor feels feminine to me. Survivalist feels a little more masculine, frankly. And yeah, they're out in the middle of the forest. But man, when you're cutting down a tree, metaphorically, you start to sweat, your muscles hurt, and to be able to say, this is hurting. Man, I don't like being alone. Do you? And to begin to open up some door that has just been shut for so long, it becomes a way of creating a community where the emotions are shared and given permission.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think I try to create that, but it can be difficult because many men are have succumbed to this sort of this the normal standard worldview. And in a
That's right.
space in a divorce support space, it's not very helpful. It made me think what you were saying, changing the language. Is it almost like sort of, I don't want to say tricking because that seems like not the right word, but it's similar. Like, you have to sort of, I guess, frame it in a way that makes it palatable.
Absolutely. If it's not palatable, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
I mean, I could put, you know, anything over like vegetables for my kids, but
Right.
they're not going to eat it because they're going to see what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
So instead of acting tricky around this, it's saying, so there's the word survivor, but I actually think that we're talking about being a survivalist here, and these are my reasons why. So I'm not being tricky. I'm
Right.
actually talking to the brain and the part of the brain, the amygdala that holds joy and holds grief, and saying, you know what, there's another way to look at this. And if you can think of yourself as a survivalist, which feels maybe a little bit more masculine. The other thing is that when we tell our stories over and over again, or we think them over and over again, we become immune to them. And so by finding a different way to tell the story, by finding a different way to lay down what is being experienced, it actually gives the brain a different pathway. And what we're trying to do when there is such pain over divorce, over feeling alone, over feeling like you don't even know what your personal identity is anymore. And when there is the magnitude of this traumatic imprint, it's like I don't know what my personal identity is. I don't know what my social identity is. Because when you're a couple, you kind of move in couple circles. And when you're not a couple, oftentimes those couple circles, though they may try to include you, you may not feel comfortable. So then you're going to need to figure out a way to realign with a different circle, and not necessarily a circle that supports you being enraged all of the time or in fury all of the time, because that just eats at your gut, eats at your soul, and then you become something that you may not even recognize or want to own.
Man, you are preaching to the choir. I mean, I get it. And we're talking. There's so many things I scribbled down here. But I'm going to pivot to anger because that one is
Okay.
so.
It's monumental.
Well, it's so. I relate to that so much. Like, and I see it so much again. With the Facebook group. And my own personal experience. I was angry. And I've had traumas and losses in my life. I lost my father when I was 22, and again, I
Mm,
was angry at the world.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and then, of course, when she left, I was angry at her, and then the system and all this, and you know, it's there. Anger is to me is just a masking emotion, especially for men. And it covers up a lot of stuff. And I think the
What do you
trick
think it
is,
covers up the most?
I would say hurt probably, but I think shame is lumped in there too. They might be 50-50. It's certainly
Mhm.
It certainly, I think hurt probably is the most prevalent because we're so poor. I mean, shame too. We're really bad at expressing that for sure. But I think that's so deep down that I think it takes a lot of work to get to there. And I don't know if that's, I think the hurt covers that a little bit too. Um, but I think it's the inability to latch onto that hurt because we're told not to, right? And so we go to the anger because we're allowed to be angry, stomp off, throw
Oh
things like
yeah,
we
we could
do
be
that.
angry.
Sure, we can do that one. But I do think that there's a couple things. One, I think you need to exhaust the anger to get beneath it, right? You can't just be like, I'm not going to be angry. I'm going to focus on the hurt. You can do that, but I think you really need to, as a man, you need to exhaust that anger because it's such a lightning quick reaction. And so I
Sure.
think so. I have this dance where I have to allow. I don't have to. I choose to allow men to be a little bit angry. Yep, be pissed. Be pissed at your
Yeah,
ex, though. Don't make it.
absolutely.
Don't turn it to every other female in the world. That's nonsense. I have two daughters that probably influences my outlook because if I didn't, I could see being very, very anti-female or whatever,
Hmm.
right?
Good. Well,
Misogynist.
they're a gift then to
Oh,
you,
a
aren't they?
thousand, a million, a billion percent. Like
Yeah.
you couldn't measure it.
Yeah.
But I do think that you have to allow a little bit of that anger because it needs an outlet. But it's just this dance where I think you have to release the anger in some kind of way, but you have to be mindful that what you're doing is hopefully venting to get beneath it. But that's it's easier said than done because leaning on the anger is so second nature and so important, or so prevalent in men. I don't know if you see. I'm sure you must. I know I see it a ton.
Oh, sure, absolutely. Anger, anger walks in the room, right? It's palpable. You feel it, and then it embodies you, and it really can take over if you let
Hmm.
it.
Yeah.
And that's where, kind of having a conversation with this anger and saying, whoa, wait a minute, hold on. Do I really want to embody this anger like this every single day?
Mm.
It's exhausting.
Yes, yes, it
It's
is.
exhausting. And you're not really yourself. You're
Mm-mm.
just your middle name becomes anger. And it's
Yeah,
like, where are you?
yeah.
Like I want to see
Amen.
you. And one of the pieces here, which I think is kind of important, and in the journals that I've been producing lately, at the back of the journal, and I don't really call it a journal, I just call it notes to self because
Mm.
I think that journal is overused. Again, it's
Right.
like I try to replace
Yeah.
the idea here. we
I
we
like that.
all could write we all write notes to self all the time,
Sure.
right?
I like that.
So notes to self, and in the back of the book I have 5 pages of just lists of emotions, different words
Mm.
for different experiences, because we don't we it's so difficult to know precisely what we're feeling. Anger might be it, or depression might be it, but what if it's malaise, or what if it's depletion,
Mm.
or what if it's, and finding more appropriate words. And one of the things that I've found with in men's groups that I've led is giving them the list of words and say, just pick out the words.
Mm.
What feels most appropriate? There's anger, okay, but what else is there? And then I'm taking them out of kind of the anger, and yet giving them a boundary of these are word lists,
Mm.
and working a little creatively, like, and this is going to sound like, really, this really works, but yeah, it really works. You create a circle on a piece of paper, and it's like a mask, and you just say, write all the things, all the words down around this divorce that you feel, or that you block,
Mm.
or that you wish you felt. And then from that little piece of paper, you ask them to pick one word, and from that one word they then create one sentence.
Mm.
And what
Yeah.
it does is it creates a distance from what they're feeling. It's called, it's sign, in my world, it's called a projective technique. But what it also does is it takes whatever's going on inside, and puts it onto the page, and then they can talk about it from a little bit of a distance. And when they're ready to own it, they can.
I like that. I mean, it reminds me of a recent episode where Dr. Dean talked about being external with your grief rather than internal. Um,
That's right.
it made me think of uh, I scribbled this down earlier, input and the importance of it from others, because I love what you said. It's sort of like your brain knows this way, right? It knows, you know, take go up 50 feet and take a left or whatever. And then someone says, hey, you can take a right. And you're like, wait,
Yeah.
what? What do you mean you can take a right? So how
Right.
important is input to processing these things? How important is someone outside of you to help you process grief and emotions and all these kinds of things?
Yeah, it's kind of like being your own editor. You can't be your own editor, right? As much as you think that you can be, you absolutely can't. You can't edit whatever, your own writing, and you just miss things.
Yeah.
So it's good to have, someone in your corner to say, "Hey, can I run this by you?" Now, that doesn't you have to figure out who you're going to trust, and trust is going to be a really big issue if you've been left unexpectedly, your whole world is blown up. And so trust is a big deal. It's a big deal, for anyone who's going through a divorce, and then making new steps, next steps into who to trust, how to trust, what does trust even feel like? And one of the things I say is it's a good idea not to trust. It's a good idea to test the waters. And there shouldn't be blind trust, and especially when the heart and the soul have been hurt and the gut has been just taken apart and you feel like you've just been you've been shredded. And now it's not about putting yourself Humpty Dumpty,
Right.
let's just put ourselves back together. It's like, what is this new mosaic going to be? Who do I really, how do I want to step into the world as this reinvented self, if you will, because it's not working the way it was,
Mm, yeah, that one hits home.
right?
Yeah, I say that all the time because I mean, in general, just like if you look at suicide stats and with men, and you think what we're doing is not, it's just not working.
No,
It's
no,
just not working.
that's right. And the
Um,
suicide stats are really interesting as well, that you really you bring up a good and a very sad,
hmm,
um, deep um, issue, which is I'd rather die than live with this pain. But I don't know that it's really the death happens, right? The choice to end one's life and to choose an end of life path is one part of it, but truly in the people who are don't succeed, when they talk about it, it's like I just wanted the pain to end, not really my life. And that's where we must distinguish and help our men who might go that in that direction of, like, you want the pain to die. Let's really distinguish that you want this pain to die. And let's try to think about what you can cherish. Because right now, you're not tapping into what you can cherish.
yeah, the stats are, it's sad and terrible, and I've experienced it. I lost a gentleman in the support group.
Mm.
Surprisingly, only one that I know of in 4 years, that I know of. But
Yeah,
it's sad. I think it's a momentary lapse, um, uh, a desire to just throw in the towel that I don't. Yeah, they don't. I don't know that they want to end their life, like you said, as much as they want the pain to stop. But isn't that?
yeah,
I mean, that just speaks to what we're talking about, like men's
totally.
inability to handle the emotional pain, emotions, period, in some ways, right? We can
That's
handle
right.
anger and a
That's
little
right.
joy, maybe if our sports team wins or whatever. Um, but there's a sadness
True.
there.
There's a
And
deep sadness, and you mentioned joy, and the idea of joy. If I can get people to recognize that tiny moments of joy,
Mm,
let's just harness a tiny moment.
hmm
And that tiny moment might be a breath. It might be that you went to the gym and you lifted 50 pounds. It might be that you actually slept through the night.
mm.
It might be that you actually decided to shower after not showering for a week. And those can be tiny moments of joy.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. One of the other struggles, again, one of the things I scribbled down, is identity, and then a loss of identity. I felt like was one of the bigger things for me that was difficult, because I was, a husband, I was a father. Of course, I remained a father, but not full time. I became a different father. Um, but I also think that there's an excitement. It's funny because when you get to a certain point, you can almost get to an excitement about the opportunity, right? Like, oh shit, I can be whatever I want now. But boy, it takes an awful lot of work to get to that point.
It does.
Is that something that you have guys focus on, is like creating a new identity? Is that something that you recommend?
So, it depends on what you mean by new identity. We are who we are, right?
True.
Um, I perhaps the suggestion is, can you be an explorer?
Mm,
Can you figure out, what are the things that you wish that you had tried that you never did? Are there parts of yourself that you shut down because you realized that your partner didn't like those parts of you that were important to you? And maybe it's, you liked basketball, but because of your family circumstance, you stopped watching it, and I'm really mentioning something like mundane, but
right.
wow, okay, I have the freedom now to watch my basketball or maybe go to a game, and it's about pushing the self. Now, I would love to talk just for a moment though about personality and personality structure, because there are
Sure.
people, men out there, all people really, they're extroverts, and some are introverts, and some are ambiverts, a little bit of both. And what I write about in my book, It's Grief, is the importance of understanding one's personality. Like, who are you? Not to pigeonhole you, but to realize I'm more of an ambivert, or which is a little bit of both, or I'm more of an introvert, or I'm more of an extrovert. And what kind of a problem solver am I? Am I fixed? Like, I'm in front of a boulder, and don't help me. I'm going to stand there with my pick, and I'm going to just continue to go at it, and I don't need anybody's help. Or are you mutable, where you stop everybody who's driving by and say, "Come help me"?
Right.
Or, are you more, egoic, where you stand on top of the boulder and say, "I've got this,"
Right.
and because those kind of paradigms are going to help you better understand who you are in the world, when those questions may have never been asked of yourself, and actually probably weren't even suggested to you, because the guy who's more of an extrovert, the way he calms his nervous system is he goes out with his buds or with friends, or he goes to work events. Um, and the one who's an introvert is going to have one or two people who he hangs with, and nothing is wrong with either choice.
No, 100%. Well, that leads me to what we're ultimately going to talk about, and that is some of the bigger mistakes that men make. And I think perhaps, obviously, suicide aside, there's no bigger mistake than that one. But I think dating, or yes, dating, or trying to replace, I did it, I'm guilty as charged, their ex as soon as possible. I just need to find another one, and that will make everything better. Um,
Everything all better, right?
yes, yeah, what a crock of shit that is. Um,
Oh, it is definitely a crock of shit.
yeah. Is that, I mean, I see it all the time. I'm sure you must see it. Is that probably, I mean, in terms of, I mean, there's obviously, you could get go on a bender and drugs and drink. I mean, there's some bad things that you can do. Obviously, you can get angry and take that out on folks and whatnot. But like in terms of common mistakes, this seems to be the biggest one. And for me, while I understand, it's so frustrating to see. And I don't know exactly why, because I did it too. Um, but is that something that you see, and why is that? Why do men, and I'm sure women do it too, dive right into dating immediately after and try and replace their ex?
Well, we really talked about it earlier in the show.
Mm,
You know, it's how do I be alone? And I
yeah,
can't be alone, right?
yeah,
And so that's one piece. If I can just attach again to another,
mm,
even though there's a really good chance that there was something up with the attachment story in that prior relationship, and you're just going to continue to make the same fusion mistakes that you made in the past, right?
yes,
And looking to fuse rather than being a more differentiated self and saying, wow, I need to really learn about me. And I need to learn about me in such a way that like, how much space do I need when I'm in a relationship? And how much do I need to figure out who I am before I actually involve myself with another? Okay. And of course, it's hard to be alone. And we learned that during that virus that came upon us, right? And too many people were alone, and a lot of divorces happened, and a lot of pregnancies happened, and it was a real mix, and that aloneness factor. If you can figure out how to be with yourself and to be comfortable with yourself, that's when you can be more comfortable with another.
isn't that the crux of it? Is you're not comfortable with yourself
To
more than
some
anything?
degree. Yeah, to some degree, although we live in a culture that if you are, someone who really liked um, having a partnership and having the partnership that included other couples, that included going to, out to nightclubs or out to dinner
Right.
with other couples, or picnics, or whatever the case may be. There's a social aspect that when you then find yourself single, that you've not only gotten divorced from your partner, you've gotten divorced from some of that social milieu. And so it's multiple losses, it's layers of losses. And there are some friendships that sustain themselves, but there are some that don't. And I call these, kind of like the little G's and the big G's. And the big G's are the big losses, like the divorce, like the sudden divorce. And then there are the little G's, which are the losses of those social groups, which can be a big G or can be a social, a little G.
Right.
And so we've got the loss of that identity. And yet, if we are building up the learning of a new self and a learning of how to calm the self, which is huge.
Oh
How
yeah.
do I calm my nervous system down on my own? And look, working out is really super. Sex is certainly a great way to calm oneself down. And sometimes it's men that go onto porn sites and really get very, very hyper involved in porn. And in some ways that may relax them, but then in another way, talk about the shame, and then there's guilt, and then there's regret, and there's remorse, and that becomes part of the story because of the coping methods that are chosen.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think it leads to me, it leads to learning then how to sit with some of these negative emotions and process them, right? Because what we're talking about is avoiding them,
Right.
but also in some way creating them due to the actions. It's this weird feedback loop. Again, it goes back to story. Like the story
Yep,
is, I have no worth, so let me do some shit that's going to reinforce that, right?
that's right. That's right.
And so
Reinforce it. Oh, can I just say one thing? It's
absolutely,
it's it's not only, thank you. It's
yeah,
not only like a reinforcing, it's 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 a double bind,
Mm,
because on one hand it reinforces the shame and the guilt and the regret, but on the other hand it's like, oh, this person is really into me now, and so you start dating or serially dating, and it's like, look, that's my worth, she really wants me, or this person really wants me.
right.
And it's like, it's just the honeymoon phase of whatever it is.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. And this is why I say, like, I have a rule in my Facebook group: don't post pictures of your new girlfriend. I don't care. I don't care even a little bit. And guys will be like, oh, it gets so much better. I have a new girlfriend. I'm like, fucking A, you lost me at I have a new girlfriend. I mean,
Yeah,
listen, good relationships are good, absolutely, positively, but that doesn't make or break your life, or at least it shouldn't, because see previous relationship that led to a fucking divorce and crushed your world,
that's
and
right.
now here we
That's
are,
right.
right?
That's
And
right.
and did we learn anything in the process, or are we just repeating patterns?
That's
So that
exactly right.
that leads me to the question. What do you do then? Like if you know you're, or if you're saying some of these things to yourself, like my dear member Kirby, God bless you, Kirby. You're devastated right now, and you think you need to find someone else because you can't be alone because you have a big heart and it has to be shared, or whatever that you say. How do you get this guy to stop this hamster wheel of gosh, I don't know, self-emasculation maybe?
Yeah, it is. It's a great term, self-emasculation. It, it, it it's about how much do they dare themselves. It becomes a dare. It becomes a challenge to face, to meet their courage, and the courage to kind of sit in the shit, so to speak, and to say, I'm going to sit in this, and I'm and but I'm going to give a time limit,
Mm,
and I'm going to say, okay, you know what, this I'm feeling really alone now, and I feel anxious. And when I'm angry, I don't feel the anxiety. When I'm angry, the anxiety is gone. So when I'm angry, um, thankfully I don't feel the anxiety. But when I'm feeling that anxiety, I'm not in touch with my anger. The anxiety is there. And what is anxiety? You know, your heart compounds. Your mouth is dry. There's sweat going down, and you're getting messages from your brain, and those are negative cognitions, and they're like, you're not good enough, you're bad, if you're not partnered, who are you? And it's really learning how to do some corrections and give yourself what I call positive cognitions. And if any of your listeners go onto my website, I have lists of the negative cognitions and the positive cognitions, and it's just edynathan.com. And it's free, it's a free download, because learning how to interrupt the negative cognitions with the positive, and is a real easy exercise that I teach to everybody I work with, which is just put a rubber band around your wrist, snap the rubber band, say, stop it, I'm going to change this thought to something
mm,
that's a little more positive, which is, okay, I know I'm struggling right now, and I can see that if I just sit with this for a minute, that I have options, and my option is, and look at what those options are, and to have some safe friends in your like field of vision, so to speak, who you can call. Or you say, you know what, I know I'm going to have a rough night tonight because it's your anniversary. It's Thursday used to be date night. And you look at a calendar, and this is another thing I talk about in my book, It's Grief, is the calendar markers. You sit and you look at a calendar for the next 6 months, and you mark the calendar for days that are going to be really hard days. It might be Friday nights, it might be the
right,
weekend, and you make sure that you've got things to do that are inspiring, whether it's, it used to be meetup, but it's
right.
getting yourself involved in something that might be creative. I mean, some of my guys have like become woodsmiths, and they've
Mm.
just, they've learned how to work with wood, and that's been a wonderful outlet for them. You've seen football players crocheting, or knitting. I mean, and I'm not saying for anybody to go do this, but it's finding something that becomes a ritual. It could be breathing, it could be yoga, it could be Tai Chi, anything to help the dysregulated mind and body become more regulated.
Yeah,
And that's the goal.
it's about, I mean, you got to be deliberate, right? Like
Yep,
this is
it's
what I'm going
deliberate.
to do.
It's deliberate. A couple who comes into me and says, "Oh, you know what, we don't have enough sex," and it's like, "Well, can you make a date for sex?" "Oh, I don't really want to do that," and
Right.
it's like,
Right.
"Okay, now you've got a problem here. The problem is that you feel like you're not having enough sex, but your lives are really, really crazy and busy with kids." But you don't want to make a date on the calendar because that feels just too much.
Right.
And it's like, wow, there's an answer, and you're not even willing to try.
Well, I think that happens with many folks in terms of they always have a good reason, or I can't remember the phrase,
Why
but like,
not?
yeah, it's always like, nah, that won't work. Well, how about this?
Yep.
No, like
Yep.
no answer is good enough, right?
Yep.
Because again,
Yep.
it feeds the narrative. They don't want to change.
Totally.
Yeah.
It totally feeds the narrative. And then it goes right into, I'm not good enough. I'm never going to have another partner. And it's like, yeah, you know what? Maybe you will and maybe you won't. And who are you?
Yeah.
Because whoever you meet now, you're older, you're hopefully you're a little wiser, and you don't want to repeat.
Yeah. No,
So,
God, no.
you don't want to repeat. So, how do you not repeat? Maybe you say, you know what? I'm going to take 6 months off,
Yeah.
and I'm going to figure out who the hell I am. And that can be from the books you like to read, the work that you do, the kind of parent you want to be, and there's a framework that I use. I'm writing this new book, and it's called, right now, the working title is Dare to Live, from loathing to liberation to love. And what's really, really interesting is that we become hostages of the imprints, the traumatic imprints that we experience. And divorce is one of those traumatic imprints. And what I teach are actually hostage negotiation strategies. And the first strategy is curiosity. Awesome, bodacious, radical curiosity. And that curiosity is about the self.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's key to this. I think it's having the courage to, and I think that's a big, I've circled courage. That's a huge one for me. It's tattooed on my body. It's one of the core
Oh,
values of the Navy. Because
yeah.
I did time in the Navy.
Thank
Um,
you. Thank you for your service.
yeah, it was a long time ago, but you're welcome. But I think it does take. It's not just about a desire, or I mean that's part of it, or um, wanting to avoid or whatever. Like there's a need for courage or grit. You mentioned that in the blog. Like
Grit. Yeah.
you have to want it in a way, but you have to take a leap, right? In a way,
Yeah.
like you have to be like, I'm going to
It's
go
a
down a
it's a
different road.
total leap. It's a
Yes.
total leap. Yeah. Yeah. Completely. It's it's a leap of faith in the self,
Yeah. Yeah. And
you
that's
know?
and if you have no self-worth, boy, that's a big fucking leap to take. But that's why I think it's important to get that outside input, right? From folks who have already done it, right? And said, no,
That's
I
right.
was just like you, but I took that leap. I believed in what I could become or what I wanted to become, whatever it is, however you
That's
wrap
right.
your brain around it. Edie, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. You mentioned your website, but let's solidify that. How can people find you and everything you've done
Sure.
and are doing?
Yeah. So my website is just edynathan.com. And I've got so many different, free stuff. And if you mention this show, you'll get a free chapter from the book, It's Grief. And you can find me on Substack. You can find me on Medium, a Psychology Today. And you can always, through my website, you can always email me any questions you've got. And I promise you, it's not some member of my team who responds. It's me.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. As you
Thank you.
know, the last question that we ask everyone on this podcast is, what words of wisdom would you impart to a man just beginning his divorce journey?
Take it slow. Be kind to yourself in a way that you can't even imagine, and even probably um, don't even know what that means yet, but explore it. Be be in your courage and be willing to be in the cave where the shadows of your own darkness exist, and rumble with those shadows so you can figure out who your allies are as you move on this journey.
Excellent words, Edie. Thank you very much for doing this. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching and or listening. If you are feeling alone on this journey, please join our Discord server. Becoming a Phoenix is not a solitary act. It is one achieved through community. Our Discord server is just that, a community of men fighting to survive, thrive, and rise from their divorce. Go to risingphoenixpodcast.com/Discord for information on how to join and what is contained in our Discord server. Please join us.